Welcome back to Cash and Sass, the podcast where we ditch the shame, talk real numbers, and build bold, bankable wealth without sacrificing who we are. I'm your host, Lisa Marie, the fractional CFO, wealth mentor, and the sassy wealth queen behind Transcendent Wealth Co. If you're ready to scale with strategy, own your power, and finally feel wealthy in every sense of the word, then you're in the right place. Today's episode is one of the conversations that hits deep. My guest, Scott Maderer, is a stewardship coach, author, and a host of the Inspired Stewardship podcast. He and his wife went from buried in debt to the point of feeling hopeless to becoming completely debt-free, buying their home in cash, and building a business that helps others do the same. We're diving into how faith, behavior, and self-management can transform your finances and how true wealth starts with who you become, not what you earn. So, as I say, let's get into it. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for being here. I want to just kind of dive in. Your story is powerful. You and your wife, you talked about how you hit a point of financial and emotional breaking. So what I'm curious is, what was that moment like and what shifted everything?
It was a lot of things that built up over time that got to that point. We were building a house. And when I say building a house, I don't mean we were having a house built. I mean, we were literally going out on the weekend and driving nails into wood to build a house. And we were putting a lot of those things on credit cards and then just life. I was a school teacher. I'd stop and buy some movies, she'd go and buy this and basically just normal, quote unquote, things. But the real key, I think, is we weren't communicating about it. We weren't talking about it. I was shielding her from the financial stress by, I've got to be a good man and protect her and not share. Of course, my wife's a smart lady. She knew what was going on, and she's going to not add to my stress by not talking to me about it, which of course effectively added to both of our stress.
Right.
Because we're not talking about it, we're not communicating about it. And so we ended up over time building up the debt. And I began to feel like I was literally worth more dead than alive. My life insurance would pay off all the debt, would leave my wife with some money. She'd be able to start over. I began to think about suicide. We were probably headed towards divorce, and in large part because we weren't communicating. And the breaking point basically came when I began to hear some different things on the radio just by chance. They changed the lineup. The irony is we used to listen to talk radio to keep myself awake while I was plotting to pretend like I fell asleep while driving home. That was going to be my way of suicide. And it's like, people are like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm like, it doesn't have to make sense. That's not the point.
In your brain at the moment, it did.
It made sense then. I understand that it's not logical, but it doesn't matter because you're not thinking logically. You're thinking emotionally. And they began to change the lineup. I began to hear some different messages. It was actually the Dave Ramsey show. I remember arguing with the radio on the way home about how stupid all of it was and nobody could do this. And finally, on one day, I heard somebody share their story, and it wasn't identical to mine and my wife's, but there was enough similarities that I heard some similarities and went, well, wait a minute, if these people did it, maybe there's something to this. And so I came clean by going that weekend and sitting down with my wife and saying, okay, here's the situation, here's what's going on. And of course, she's going, yeah, I knew all of this already. And I told her I was listening to the show and maybe we could do something, but it was make it or break it. We're either going to do something or we need to separate and go our separate ways. And we decided to come together and change the way we were living. We radically changed everything we were doing. We didn't follow everything in the Dave Ramsey plan. We didn't do everything that he said. It wasn't one of those things, but we did radically change the way we were living to begin to shift what we were doing. And in doing that, everything else then began to change as well.
Well, I think that's important because I'm going to be honest, I am not a big fan of Dave Ramsey.
I'm not any longer, but at the time it meant a lot.
I was going to get to that. And there's a lot of people who aren't. I profoundly disagree with so much. And sometimes my mentor has said this to me, so I think this is really important to say for the listeners. Sometimes you hear something, and just because you're not not a fan of whoever, or you're not going to listen to 100% of what they say, sometimes that 1% of what you hear is just what you need to hear to make the change that you need to make, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the key, right? You didn't go, oh, I don't agree with this, and I don't agree with this, and I don't agree with that. It was, wait, did I hear that right? Okay, hold on. Let me, could we do that? It gave you that door, I think, in my opinion. That's what it sounds like. Y'all made radical changes, yes, and maybe you did do some of those things, but that 1% that you heard that clicked is what I think is important, because a lot of times we block out the 1%, and that 1% is really all we need in order to make the change. I know it goes the same for me as well.
Yeah. What it did for me was it gave me hope. It isn't so much the methodology or the information or other things, personal, professional, whatever, that I agreed with or didn't agree with. It's much more that honestly, hearing the story of somebody that said, here's what we did and here's how it changed. What it did is gave me hope that, hey, maybe there is a way to change this.
Right. And again, it's that 1%.
Then we dove in and changed, but it's not, it was hope that was really the needed ingredient.
It was the 1%. It was hearing. And that's one of the reasons why I've started my podcast, is because I want people to realize so often we feel, especially when it comes to money, our money stories, our money mindset, the situation we're in with money, life, mental health, we all so often feel like we're alone.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't, and you're not supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to. And my idea is, okay, that didn't get us anywhere except where we're at. And that's the reason why Cash and Sass was started. That was the whole reason. Like, let's kick this taboo to the curb, and let's talk about it, and let's give a place for people to be able to go to hear and go, oh, wait, okay, I'm not alone. Right there. If he could do it, then maybe there's hope for me. If she was able to go from food stamps and foreclosure to building a business, making $6 figures, okay, then I can do something. That's the whole thing, because so often when we feel like we're alone, sometimes that 1% is just the hope that we need, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know what got you to where you got that hope, but what I want people to understand, and maybe you can just give us a couple of steps that you did, as I understand it's a bunch. What eventually led you to financial freedom?
So it's really the attitude change, much more than, I mean, there's mathematical mechanics in terms of we short and simple, we lived on less than we made, and we took the rest of it and used it to pay down debt. I mean, that's really all there is to it. There's all these, you can do it that way, and you can do it that way, and you can do it that way. And it's like, to some extent, it's like,
so you
that doesn't matter. Do it.
Right.
So you
analyze your spending then, right?
Yeah,
you analyze your spending,
we sat down,
and you said, okay, what can we cut back? What can we cut out? Because this is now the priority.
Right. It's about looking back at what was really important to us at that time, which was paying down debt, and saying, okay, so what do we have to do different to be able to have money? So my wife went and got a job, that she had been working. She'd just been at home during that time. She went and got a job for a little while, not a full-time job, but still a little extra coming in. We changed the way we were spending on things that we thought were important. We cut a bunch of things out that really weren't that important at the time. So it wasn't, again, you use the word analyze. I'll be honest. It's not, quote, analyzing in terms of, you sit down and you do it with this fine-tooth comb. It's more, to me, it's more of a process of discovery, because once you discover what your new priority is, it becomes really easy to give up other things. It's less about what you're saying no to, because I think that's one of the mistakes people make with budgets. They look at it as restrictive. It's what am I saying yes to? What's most important? And all of a sudden that other stuff, it's like, well, that's not important anyway. I don't care, So eventually in the middle of that, so we paid off $78,842 $858.42. Sorry, my dyslexia kicked in, and did that in 2 years, 11 months on an average income of $55,000. So you can do the math and go, okay, y'all weren't living on anything. That's the only way that math works. And the reason why is because that became more important to us. In the middle of that, I left teaching and went into a corporate job. I was making, all of a sudden I went from making $40,000 as a teacher to making like $70,000 as in the corporate job, which helped. But I'm driving a 1999 Ford that literally the headlighter was like coming unglued because of the Texas sun and falling down and hitting me in the roof. And I'm just gluing it back up, and people are like, go buy a new car. I'm like, nope, new car's not important right now. We'll get it. By the way, I drive a nicer car now, but it wasn't important then. And so we gave that up then, and it is a little bit of that, give up everything that you really don't want, that's not a priority to you. We still did things. I mean, we went, we're big into Renaissance festivals. We still went to the Renaissance Festival every year, but we did it once a year. We set a budget, we put aside money, that's what we did. So
you added it,
yeah.
and then I think that's the key. You decided, okay, this is important. We want to do this at least once a year. We added it to the budget and we saved for it. So then it was put up and we had the money to go.
And we were willing, and we did do the thinking of, well, we could use that money to pay off debt. Yeah, no, it's worth taking a little longer to pay off debt to be able to do this thing because this is important to us. And this is, it's good for us from this was something we did for us, it was kind of our reward.
Well, it's something, right, right. And I think that's important because when you enjoy something, and I think people need to hear this, it doesn't have to be so restrictive to where you don't live your life, right? You get to decide. So if that means it takes you 4 years instead of 2 years and 11 months, okay, as long as you're okay with
it. As long as you're making a conscious decision.
Right. As long as, and I tell people all the time, knowledge is power. And when you know what's going on and you make that conscious decision, and that's the decision you put on your money roadmap, and that's what I call the budgets as money roadmap. When you put that on your money roadmap, then okay, as long as, like Scott and I are both saying, as long as it is a conscious decision. Right. So often, though, no one looks.
We just do it. We do it by habit.
We just do.
it becomes habit. It becomes routine. It becomes, because you're not thinking about it, not paying attention to it, it becomes invisible. And once it's invisible, you're not making conscious decisions anymore.
Right.
And this happens to us, by the way, with more than just money. It's why I tell people that the truth is the money's the symptom. The problem's not the money, the problem's mindset and behavior and habit and belief. And, it's all of that stuff that's actually the problem.
And we're not making sure that we are living aligned with our values and our goals, which is where I created those 5 wealth codes from, because, which is, if y'all have been listening to my podcast, they're spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, and financial. And financial specifically lasts for a reason. It's because most people start with the financial, but I have found, even with me, that if we're out of alignment in these, then it trickles over and affects the financial. And the financial can also affect everything else. Yeah. It just does. I mean, and here's a perfect example too. For example, I'm in the process of going to be buying a house. There are things, my business had to have some debt to make it through. I believe there's good debt and there's bad debt. Now, the brokers already talked to me. We've got a plan. Some of the debt needs to be paid down, which I'd already been doing. But now I've become more aggressive, right? Because again, okay, this was important. However, now it's more important. So what in that money roadmap am I temporarily giving up or cutting back, etc., so that the house is bought come time when it's time to be bought? And again, that's a conscious decision, right? And when you look at your business and you're seeing things aren't working and you're like, well, why didn't I see that? Well, because we trust and we turned a blind eye. And when we go back and center in and become grounded and really look at everything, we can make conscious decisions. And if that means letting someone go that's off your team and having someone else, that all affects the money, the way you look at your business. It affects everything. And I really think that's important. And I love how you said that once you acknowledged what was important, you were then able to look at it, because that's honestly, that's what's happened again, is I was able to acknowledge what was the most important right now. And okay, this is what we're going to do to get there. You said that, and we talked about, you said it just a minute ago, that this almost ended your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
What changed once you both started communicating and working towards the same financial goals?
We didn't get divorced. We have a marriage now that is very healthy. I mean, again, we've been married 29 years. I also think it helped us raise our son. My son is 22 years old, successfully launched and out of the house and works for a living and does what he wants to do. I think we helped set him up with good money habits and good money mindset. It's basically, it changes everything else, because when you're aligned on the big picture, then all of the other stuff starts getting easier. You're talking about buying a house. We bought a house last year to move up and be a little closer to my family. That was a decision that we made. So we moved from where we'd lived for 25 plus years and moved up to a different part of the state. But we've designed our life, because we communicate well, that's what we can do. It's about looking at things not only short term, but long term, and then also realizing that things are going to change. So it's not a one and done either.
Because
I think a lot
life
of times,
is going to happen.
Yeah. People think it's one and done. We communicate, we get out of debt, we're whatever. Okay, now everything. No, not necessarily. And I'm not even talking about whether you go back into debt or any of that.
No, I mean, curveballs happen, right?
And things, we're empty nesters now. Guess what? Decisions we make now are different than whenever the kiddo was at home, because life is different, because we don't have a kid living in the house.
Right. Right.
So it's everything over and over again. You've got to constantly keep those lines of communication open. And by the way, if you're single and not in a relationship, it doesn't change anything, except you're now talking to yourself.
I talk to myself quite often.
It's still the same thing, because guess what? What's important to you today is going to be different in 2 years. And that's not bad. It's just life, that's normal. But so often we think of everything as a photograph. I'm fond of saying life is a film strip, not a photograph, because no matter where you are, if you're at the bottom of the valley, you think, I'm going to be here this is it. This is the rest of my life. Everything stinks and the rest of my life's going to stay. If you're at the top of the mountain, it's like, everything's great. Everything's always going to be great. Both of them are wrong. It's like, this is not how life works. And so it was being open to that, and the realization that, there's ebbs and flows, there's changes, there's dynamics, but at the core, what's important is that we keep the lines of communication open. We still have a weekly meeting that we sit down and talk, not just money stuff, but just schedule, life, what's going on? What are you doing? What am I doing this week? Who's in charge of what? When the kid was here, who's picking up the kid on Thursday? That kind of stuff. So it's just about getting on the same page mechanically, but also from a values and priorities kind of way, where at the end of the day, if you can do anything with the partner if you agree. It's when you start pulling in two different directions that there's a problem. And usually you're pulling in two different directions because you're not sitting down and going, wait, what's important to you? What's important to me? Right. Okay, let's talk about that, and figure out what do we have in common? What's our why that is the same? Because, there's things that she loves to do that I'm like, I don't care. And there's things I love to do that she's like, I don't care. But we give room to each other for those things too, because it's about, well, yeah, but that makes you happy, oh, this makes me happy. But when we're at the beginning, we gave all of that stuff up. It's like, that's why we did the Ren fairs. That was something we both enjoyed. So she gave up some things that she enjoyed that I didn't. I gave up some things that I enjoyed that she didn't. And we said, we're going to commit to doing this one thing that we both enjoy, to bring us together a little bit more, but we're going to give up some of that other stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. You said just a few minutes ago that money management isn't really about money. And I want to kind of go into that. You said it's about behavior. Can you explain for the listeners what you mean?
Yeah, behavior, mindset, belief. I usually say all of those together because I think it is all of them. It's not any just one of them. What I mean by behavior in belief, it shows up in our language. Let me use this example. So a lot of times with money, we say things like, I had to do that. I had to. Actually, a minute ago, you said I had to get some debt on the business. And that phrasing is interesting because when people say I had to, in my opinion, you're abdicating. And I know this isn't exactly what you meant, but I'm using this as an example. You're abdicating choice. You're advocating power. You're saying somebody made me do it. It's external. I had to do it.
Right.
And I encourage people.
I made the choice.
You made the choice. Exactly. And I know that's what you actually meant, but because later you said choose a little different. So that's
I got to choose whether to go back to corporate or have some debt with my business and keep my business
going.
The debt. And I chose the debt.
Exactly. And that's the word that I love people to use.
I still got the freedom because the corporate wasn't going to, I sat there and weighed all the options and said, okay, debt it is.
Right. And that's the cool thing. Because here's the thing. If you choose to do it with the information you have and the data you have and everything else you had at that time, that's the other thing we'll do a lot of times is we get new information a year later and then we beat ourselves up for not having that information a year ago.
I have done that.
We all do it. It's normal. But all of that boils down to you make the best choice you can at the time you had, with the information you had, and you move forward.
Right.
And when you realize that you have the power of choice, now all of a sudden your behavior changes. You do things differently. You think differently. You act differently because it's not being put upon you. And it's a subtle, it literally can show up in people's language where it's the victim thing, is kind of the code word. Because if the life is happening to you, rather than you're happening to life, your behavior is completely different. It's passive instead of active.
And what I say is it's happening for me instead of happening to me.
Yeah. And for is a better language than to, because for you is in your behavior.
I'm in that victim. And when it's for me, it's for me to go to the next level and greater good.
And then the behavior starts to align because, again, then you get back to whether you're looking at a money roadmap or a spending plan or budget, whatever name you want to call it, you're looking at it going, that's probably not the most important thing that I should be spending my money on. I'll get rid of that, but this over here, that's important to me. And again, it can change. So it's this idea of looking at your behavior for alignment with your priorities, as opposed to it's a math problem. And it's not a goal either. It's the why behind the goal. So like debt, okay? Debt isn't good or bad. Debt just is a mechanical, mathematical thing, okay? You said you believe in some debt's good and some debt's bad. I actually think it's value neutral.
I say that when debt is bad is when we are not that we're not paying attention and being conscious of what we're doing, and that we're just charging, thinking about it. So that can become
but
bad.
Notice that's behavior. That's not the debt.
Right.
Okay. The debt is value neutral. The debt is a mathematical,
it's
mechanical
what we do. It's
thing.
how we do it. Yep.
It's simply a math formula. It's a contract.
You're absolutely
I have
correct.
said, you give me this and I'm going to give you that. That's all it is. And so it's value neutral. It's about the decisions you're making and the behavior you're using behind the debt that creates the value or the good or the bad piece to it. Same thing goes with, even if you get rid of debt, just talk spending, same thing. Income, same thing. It doesn't matter what you're looking at. What creates the value around it is your behavior, your belief, your actions, your habits, all of those things is what creates the actual value. So it moves it from being a math problem. Because here's the truth. You look at your spending plan, that's not math. That's your life. I mean, it's every single line on that is a life decision.
I will tell everybody I have one for my business and I have my personal, and I can look at them, and that is my life. That's my life.
Every line on there is something that's going to impact the way you live, the way you make decisions, the way you do that. And it's kind of the cause and effect is hard because it's really a circular thing. Meaning if you have bad behavior with your money, it shows up in things that impact your life that then impact your money. And that's a negative feedback loop. If you make good choices with your money, that impacts positively on your life and your behavior, which then impacts on your money. So either way, the momentum can be positive or negative, and you can start on either end. You can start on the belief side. You can start on the action side. Doesn't matter because it's a circle, so there is no beginning or end. It's just, does belief create action or does action create belief? Well, yes, both. There's a feedback loop between them.
That's why I say they're intertwined with each other,
no matter what,
and you can't have one without the other.
Right.
Yeah, it's just not possible.
That's what I mean by belief and behavior.
Yeah, and you're right. Because now that I think about it, I think the reason why I said good and bad is because I wanted people to realize that so often the bigwigs constantly say debt's bad.
Right.
And we need to stop, because then us people who are owning our business or middle class, we're so often beating ourselves up. And what I want them to realize is, and like what you're saying, no, let's look at, whatever decision it was that you made that got you there. Okay. Again, it's the belief thing, and it's being knowledgeable, and it's being conscious, and it's saying, okay, I'm using this. I know I'm using this, and this is how I'm going to pay it off in this time, or whatever that may be. But it's being conscious about it's knowing your numbers. I don't know how often I say that. I'm sure I'm going to say that till I'm dead. It's knowing it's knowing what's going on with your numbers and being intentional and making that conscious decision and understanding you're making that decision.
And weighing the risk and the balances. Because,
right.
For instance, having debt, by definition, increases certain kinds of risk.
Yes.
Period. Because you've got a cash flow thing that you've spoken to towards the debt, period. But does that mean taking on that risk is always bad? Well, it's not bad or good. It's just a risk.
People who own millions and billion dollars worth of businesses do it daily. So that's why I try to tell people is you got to understand, but they're making a conscious decision, right? They weighed the risks.
And a lot of times their debt is actually leveraged against themselves,
right.
Which is something that, quote, the average person has a harder time doing. There are some mathematical tricks that I'll use an example. If you own Elon Musk, just to pick on Elon Musk because he's in the news. Elon Musk owns Tesla. He owns a ton of Tesla stock. So he can actually go get a loan, pledge Tesla stock that he never really sells or gets rid of. But because it's an asset, he could actually borrow money in a way that if you didn't have, $1 billion worth of stock, you can't do. But so there are some mechanical things that people can do. But regardless, the idea is still the same. It's not it's good or bad. It's what are you doing it for? What are you aware of? Have you traded? Have you looked at the risk versus the advantage? And you've accepted that risk and you said, yes, it's worth it. Okay, great. Then go do it. But what happens usually is people end up in debt by 1,000 cuts. It's not ever any one decision. It's tons of little tiny, oh, I got to put this on the card. Oh, I got to put this on the card. Oh, I'm going to put this on the card.
And all the options.
And they never really sat down and weighed the options and the consequences and the risk. And then they look up and like my wife and I, are $70-something thousand worth of debt. You make $40,000 a year.
Yep, the head is
and you're
buried.
like, oh, how did this happen? How did we get here?
Right.
Because we never sat down. We did not go to Tahiti. There was no big expenditure. It was lots of little decisions.
Little things. Well, I mean, I say the little things is what adds up. And a lot of times what makes it all of a sudden look big is your head's buried in the sand. You're not looking up. You're just doing. And you're, like you said, you're not weighing it. You're not really, truly looking at it. And when we don't really, truly look at it, shit adds up, period.
Yep. And then you look up and you're like, how did this happen?
Right.
How did I get here? And surprise, you're there. And now you got to start where you're at and
I think that's the
decisions.
key is, okay, now you looked up, no beating yourself up because you can't do anything about what's behind you. But now you've looked up. Okay, now you get to start making decisions from here going forward on what you're going to, what you're going to do differently, what you're going to change so that you can get where it is you really want to be. You teach stewardship, which is different from the usual business talk around hustle and scaling.
Yeah.
What does stewardship really mean to you? And how do faith and purpose shape the way you view wealth creation? It's kind of a two-part question.
Sure. So stewardship, it's simplest terms, right? Stewardship simply means that the blessings that you've been given, the resources that you've been given, whether that's your time, your health, your wealth, your family, your relationships, whatever it is, career, everything that you've been given, it's yours to manage, but it's not yours to own. And philosophically, I'm a person of faith, so I look at this as, a God thing, but I honestly don't care if you're a person of faith or not. I still think that philosophy is a good mindset to have because all of a sudden, instead of holding on to everything with a closed fist, and it's about, more, I've got it, it's mine, I'm going to hold on to it, you begin to hold on to things with an open palm. And it comes and goes, it's mine temporarily to manage, but it's not really, at the end of the day, mine to own. And the reason why that's so important is when you hold things with a closed fist, things can't get out, but things can't get in too. You can't.
I have a mentor that told me
messages.
My mentor told me, she says, you've got your fists clenched. You need to open them up.
You got to open them up.
I'm laughing because I was told that recently.
Yeah. But it's true because when we do this, and it's a safety thing, it's a security thing, it's an emotional thing. It's not a math problem. Okay. I have known people that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I've had them as clients. And, they're some of the most giving, kind, open-hearted, open-handed people. And I've also known people that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars that are complete jerks about everything, and hold on to everything. Same thing at the other end of the spectrum. People worth almost nothing, very open and kind, and people worth. So it's not the money, it's not having or not having money. It's the mindset. And when you begin to grab everything like that, then all of a sudden wealth creation almost becomes combative in a way. It becomes about hoarding as opposed to having. It changes how you enjoy your money. It changes how you give. It changes how you look at everything. And so by changing that lens, it's not that you can't create wealth. And people think that if you're content, you're not driven. And it's like, no, I'm very content. And yet I also want to change things. I also want to make things better. I also want to grow my business. I want to grow that. So driven and content aren't opposites. What's actually the opposite of driven is complacency. And complacency is when you're not paying attention, So if you're intentional and paying attention and you're holding things with that open heart, and I'm truly trying to, my main goal is to serve and help others. And out of that, guess what? I get served and I get helped, So it isn't, but the mindset's different. It's not about what am I going to get? It's about how can I help others? And then it flows back to me. And so it is a mindset belief kind of thing that changes the way you look at your business. It changes the way you look at your personal situation and wealth. And I would argue in the long run, it's healthier and it honestly causes you will have more success long term. Short term, you can get a lot of success by hoarding, but long term, the most successful people I've seen are the people that have that much more open handed, much more flow through kind of mindset. In part, just because think about it, those are the people we want to be around. Those are the people that we give opportunities to. Those are the people that we like. Nobody likes to be around a greedy Gus. You sense it, you feel it. If you go to a sales situation and you go to a salesman who desperately wants to sell, you smell it, and we don't like it. It turns us off. But if you go to a salesperson that truly, honestly wants you to have a wonderful experience, and if they, they're looking at you, they're like, this isn't the right product for you, they'll tell you that, I'll go back to them 9 times out of 10, right? I mean, I'll go seek them out because it's like, you actually have my best interest at heart.
Right.
That's a simplistic example of it, but I would say that's a stewardship mindset versus a hoarding mindset.
I love that. That makes, and I'm literally thinking, okay, am I doing that in some ways? And what ways am I doing it? And how can I make sure I shift it, right? So I love that. This has been such a grounded and powerful conversation because, and that's what I love about this, is because it's been full of truth and honestly redemption and purpose, because we're saying, okay, we got just, sometimes it's just, as like I said at the beginning, small shifts, that 1% that you hear, right? And he literally said something that someone has said to me like in the last 3 weeks. Lisa, your fists are clenched open. You can't receive, right? You gotta unclench. You gotta open. And he's right. A lot of times we do that without even realizing it, subconsciously, and it's a protection. It's
thing. Normal, by the way.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's absolutely normal.
If you ever achieve the perfect stewardship mindset, and there's no component of your life where you're doing that, okay, I have yet to meet that person, and that includes me. And I've been doing this for 30 plus years and really working on it.
And that's important to know.
It's human. We can't achieve that perfectly.
Right. Right.
So it's not about getting it right, perfect. It's about working towards it. It's the journey, not the destination.
It's understanding that it's something you're going to practice every single day. It's the reason why I share my story so often, and people go, why are you telling them that you were doing so, and your business, you had to go? Because I'm human.
It's
I'm
truth.
Perfect. And life happens. And guess what? If I'm telling them that it's happening, they're going to go, oh, okay, I'm not alone. It's just a current situation I'm in. It's a season of life. It's a season of business. And I'm not putting myself down about it. It's a fact. I made a conscious decision, and now I'm making a conscious decision of what I'm doing, how I'm working with the people I'm working with, right? My business is growing and evolving. And so in doing that, we make different decisions. And that could be, okay, yes, I'm making sure the business is getting out of that debt, and how am I growing the business at the same time? So again, it's being very aware and making conscious decisions. And I love that we had all these conversations, or had this conversation about all that. Where can listeners connect with you, and can you share more about your free resources at Inspired Stewardship for those that are ready to master their time, their talent, and and all their things?
Absolutely. So I actually put together a landing page just for your listeners. So if you'll go to my website at inspiredstewardship.com, and then just /SaaS, SASS, just like the end of the podcast, what you'll find there is some free resources. Like you said, there's some on time, talent, and treasures. And then as well, there's information. I have a book called Inspired Living. So if you want just kind of a framework that lays through those 3 areas, you can purchase the book there. There's information about my podcast. I have a podcast called Inspired Stewardship, as well as other things, including how you could jump on a call and just have a quick discussion with me if you've got questions or something I said, you want more information. And you can find all of that again at inspiredstewardship.com /SaaS.
I love it. He gave us our own page. I love that. Love the link too. And for my listeners, if you've been hustling and pushing and trying to fix your money without looking at your mindset or your systems or making a conscious choice, it's time to get all of that aligned. Book your wealth alignment call today, and let's identify your profit leaks, reset your money behaviors, and help you build real sustainable wealth that feels as good as it looks and that it's aligned with your values. All the links the link that Scott gave you and all the information and the link for this will be in the show notes. And until next time, remember, confidence and cash are the ultimate power duo. Go check in with your money. And as always, have a fantastic and wealthy day. Bye.